No. What's up, everybody? This is Lady Miss from the Ground Up Productions. It's Ray, and we are here with Zoya and Steve, who are two former retired police officers. I wanted to talk with them because I wanted to hear their point of view and their perspective on how police officers deal with things in the Black community. So I know personally that you guys have been in the field, that you guys are good officers, you've done your job correctly, and you cared about the people in the community. Right now, okay, we have some issues going on where it's disturbing. It's a lot of things that's happening, and there is a disconnect between the people that the police serve and supposed to serve and protect and the police. So I want to know from you guys, how do you feel about everything that's going on right now?
Well, first I'll give my perspective, and then Steve could jump in at any time. First, my personal experience coming onto the job is very unique. However, I did leave the force around 2013, 2014 from a bad injury, where it was an altercation with two brothers fighting. However, when it comes to these issues that we see, whether it be George Floyd, Eric Garner, Breonna Taylor, my heart hurts, and I hurt because I was blue, I'm a Black woman. Okay, I have a Black son. Okay, I grew up in the same areas that most of us have grown up in. I grew up in Brooklyn. Okay, I lived in Bed-Stuy. I lived in Williamsburg. I lived in, got family in East New York. I grew up in Harlem as well. So my point is, when it comes to these issues, law enforcement has an obligation to speak out, to do something about it. You cannot just stand there and not do something, and you cannot feel as if you're stressed because you're concerned that people are holding you accountable. You must be held accountable. It is unacceptable not to be held accountable. We hold everyone else accountable.
Yes.
So when these things are happening, we have to call it the way we see it, which means that officers have to hold other officers accountable as it is occurring. Okay. I could keep going, but I want Steve to kind of jump in on this part as well.
Yeah, just to add to what Zoe said, she made a lot of great points. I spent 25 years, quarter of a century in NYPD policing. When I came into the job, we had just had the Rice and Crown Heights. And a lot of that involved the relationships between police department and people of color. And right before I retired, we dealt with Eric Gardner, and I actually dealt with those protests personally. So I got to really see a lot of what's going on. And a lot of what we see with policing, I always tell people, it's a byproduct of society. When society hasn't dealt with race in an honest way, and your policing is a byproduct of how you feel. If you're calling the police on your neighbors that are Black that are playing their music too loud, then you're part of the problem. We saw what happened in Central Park with the Cooper, the gentleman Cooper, and the lady had the same last name, but both different colors. And it's that inability for America to see that and to deal with that. And we see it in the most visible way with policing. But it's not just policing. It's the way we live. It's the little things that we go through as Black people. And I think it builds up to the point that we're seeing out in the streets. And as police officers, it is difficult because, our responsibility is to keep people safe, and allow them an opportunity to express themselves. So it becomes a little difficult and becomes personal because we're all parents. We have young kids. You have a son. We have a son. My son is bigger than me. He's older than me. And he's 11 years old. So I worry, what will an officer see? What will they see as aggressive from a kid that may just be anxious, scared? And I think that's the thing. Sometimes our natural reaction is taken as being aggressive, and it leads to a lot of what we see in the streets. And that's a lot that, as a supervisor in NYPD, I dealt with. You have to explain to cops, you're the police officer. People will be scared and nervous when you come around, and that everything is a threat or aggressive.
Right. Oh, that's really, really, really good
I
points.
got a quick question though. When we say to hold the cops accountable, the cops should hold each other accountable. I agree with that also, but also we shouldn't and then I'm gonna say the mayor, because sometimes the mayor actually, some of these political people actually feed that anger that comes from both sides, because they don't, and I ask it, because right now we got de Blasio who's trying to play the middle and not also at the same time not trying to fix it, does that also create, that the way that the cops respond because they know that you got a political person is just playing that middle line?
Sorry.
First, two things. Absolutely, you definitely agree with you. One of the main things also is that society is not willing to, deal with the issues that we talk about all the time, that are issues that we all encounter. And it doesn't matter where you are, as I, would tell my husband or just different people that I know, just because you live one place doesn't mean that it's not happening in that place. It's just different forms of racism. And we all experience it. Now, when it comes to our mayor, I will say that we can look at the Central Park incident that occurred. But I do believe when you have someone that can make statements that racism doesn't exist, that was going down to the police commissioner. That is a problem. Or when we have the chief that says, we got bigger fish to fry, that is a problem. And then now when these incidents happen, although George Floyd's incident happened after the fact, those are still emotions that people are going through. And we have to understand that, listen, these are issues that are soft spots in our community, and we got to address it. And we cannot get on the media and say something different that's contrary to what's going on.
Just to piggyback what Zoya said, politicians are going to do what politicians do. Sometimes they're just worried about their next votes. That's why I had to take my hats off to the Atlanta mayor, Keisha Lance-Bottoms, because, she got out that night. And she not only wanted to hold policing responsible, but she wanted to hold the community responsible, and that takes courage in the middle of that to say, you know what, I got to hold you responsible. You cannot burn down where we live, because at the end of the day, like I was telling a friend, they're still waiting for their jobs in Baltimore and Detroit from riots 30 years ago. We can do two things at one time. We can hold police officers responsible, but we can also do it in a way where we don't further victimize each other. When you close down that Target and people need to go there to get their medicine, or people need to work there, that's 200 jobs. So now you're forcing people into the street because they have nothing to do. So we're smart enough as a community to do both. We can address, police brutality, but we can also not burn down our homes where we need to live in.
Well, I'm sorry. I thought you.
No. I was gonna say something really quick. No, that's a really, really good point. Both of you guys are making great points. I have a question to kind of ask that kind of, relates to that. So me, like somebody like me, sometimes I'm in my emotions, right? And I'm mad and I'm upset. And when I see things happening, I'm in agreement at that time, because my frustration, my anger, and my hurt, I want to see somebody pay. Right? I want to see people hurt. Like I feel like we're hurting. So when the mayor from Atlanta was speaking at that time, I'm gonna be honest and being transparent. I didn't want to hear nothing she had to say. I was like, I don't want to hear it. I'm mad. I'm sick of this. I'm tired of our people dying. It's time that we fight back. That's the mindset that I had. I'm not even thinking on the level of what you just said, of the fact that there's jobs and there's communities and where these people are gonna go, because my emotions have taken over of thinking logically out of the pain and the hurt. So what I want to ask from you is, what do you say to somebody like me
Mm-hmm.
who feels like there's no faith and there's no hope in the justice system, and thinking how I just told you I was thinking, which is basically kind of against what you just said in a way, because I'm thinking emotionally, and out of, like I said, pain and hurt. What do you say to someone like me who's thinking that way and feel that way?
Well, first, as I, often at times, Steve and I have had numerous discussions, and I can speak as a Black woman's perspective as well as, he will speak from his perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But as an African-American woman and as a former law enforcement officer, number one, I have to be very understanding that they don't see Zoya behind this uniform. What they see is blue.
Right, right.
And they see that uniform. And while seeing that uniform, I have to understand what comes with that uniform. And so that means that I have to give a little bit more. I have to be compassionate a little bit more. I have to be understanding a little bit more. Okay, I got to understand that these are social issues. These are issues that need to be fixed. And sometimes as an officer, you may not be able to fix all these issues. But what I can do is be compassionate. I could be understanding.
Yes.
I could show respect. I can pull that officer over and say, hey, listen, slow down. I could deal with him in a way that, him or her in a way that maybe someone else can't deal with them in that moment. But I have to understand that, and I have to show that. So that's pretty much how I would address it, and that goes for anyone, because I got to understand that.
Just to follow with Zoe real quick on that point. I think one of the things that we have to do as people in positions, especially law enforcement, one thing you have to do is acknowledge people's hurt. You can't act like what we saw wasn't wrong. You can't say, well, we're going to wait and give you a statement later. You just got to say human to human, that was wrong. And those police officers need to go to jail. And that hurts me to say that because I'm a police officer. And I understand police and things happen very quickly. But that didn't happen quickly. That man took advantage of that other man, and he has to pay for it. And I think one of the steps that we have to do as law enforcement is to use empathy. I always tell my cops when I used to patrol, I said, we have a tool belt, and we have a lot of things on our tool belt. We have a radio, we got handcuffs, we have a gun. But one of the things that we have on our tool belt is the ability to empathize with the people that we work with and the people we work for, and to understand their plight. And if you can't do that, or if you can do that, you go a long way to diffusing how people think and how people feel about you. Now, particularly to what you said, I understand the frustration, but as a person, whether I'm a police officer or just someone that lives in a community, I always know there has to be a second act. We can get upset today, but what do we do tomorrow? And how do we follow through? And if in our anger, do we take the spotlight off of the officer that did this horrific crime and we put it somewhere else? Because it's hard to turn on those TVs and to see buildings burning up, and you start to take away the spotlight and you put it where it doesn't need to be. It needs to be on those police officers and what they did.
That's true.
Now,
that is so true.
And I agree with you. Because I was one of those people that felt like it was a necessary evil, and not because I agree that burning down the buildings and all that shouldn't happen. But honestly, when you look at all the marching that's been happening over the years, and I'll just go back as far as Eric Gardner, nothing changed. Then sometimes, and that's why I say it's a necessary evil, because yes, a lot of people won't have their jobs, but now these politicians are at least listening, and because before the marching, and it was just like they're doing now, the cops were beating the marchers. They were, slapping the marchers, pushing the marchers down. And when you start to see rioting across the country, it should be a wake-up call that something has to change.
One of the things I say, and I think sometimes I try to study history. I think it was incredibly hard for the people in the civil rights struggle in the late 50s and early 60s to do what they did. Remember, they used nonviolence and they were criticized.
Right.
And they took beatings and hitting. But you got to understand what happened, how we transformed this country. We got the Civil Rights Acts, we got the Voting Rights Acts. We were able to do things that people 10 years ago didn't think could be done. Now, this doesn't say that it's easy. We're not saying that we're living in the same time, but I do think one of the things that King said, you can't change darkness with darkness. Only light can change darkness. And if we stoop to those tactics of trying to, I saw a young lady take a Molotov cocktail and do it at a police van with cops in it. Once you do that, you change the dynamics. Nobody will talk about Floyd anymore. I'm telling you. We saw what happened with the Eric Garner case. And once those two officers were assassinated, and it all changed. And, it took the spotlight off of what happened to Eric Garner, and it put it on what happened to those two police officers who lost their life. And I'm telling people there is a fine line, because in your emotions, you can do things that you can't take back. That young lady cannot take back what she did. So I just want to tell people, you have to get out there. You have to stand up for your rights. But we got to be, just like Dr. King said, we have to be strategic, and we have to use our heads on how we do these things, or the people that want to hurt us will use our emotions against us.
That very, very true. I'm glad that we're having this conversation, because it's helping me see things in a different light. So I want to thank both of you guys. My next question that I have for you is, I seen a picture that Zoya posted, and it was you outside holding hands with look like people in the community. Can you tell me what exactly you were doing and why you were doing it?
Well, first of all, thank you for referencing that. That was during the Eric Garner crisis, and it was a crisis. The young man that lost his life for really no reason. And at that time, I was the commanding officer of the 2-6 precinct, which covers central Western Harlem and parts of the upper West Side. And this was just happening. We were dealing with a lot of protests. And at that time, we had people come into Morningside Park, and a large group of people. And myself and my officers, we responded to the park, and, they wanted to protest. They were very upset. And for a couple of minutes, it was a little tense. People were yelling and screaming at me, and they were screaming at the officers. But I have to say, there was a young lady that came forward, and she came up to me, and she says, "I want you to do something." And I said, I got guys on my face, and I was feeding into it a little bit. I was getting upset because I'm like, why are they coming at me like that? And she says, "I want you to pray with me." And I looked at her, and it was a young lady, and I was like, okay. And she said, "Let's pray." And then all of a sudden, people came forward, and we created that circle, and we prayed. Then we talked, and then some of the guys that were very heated, they started to talk to me, and it became, "Well, you're a brother, you know how we feel." And I said, "Yeah, I have a little son, I was, born in Flatbush, born and raised. I dealt with that." And we had great conversations for about an hour, and then everybody went their way. And it's one of the proudest moments of my 25 years in law enforcement.
Yes.
And I agree with that kind of work, because that's community policing. And what's happening now is the cops are no longer trying to be a part of the community. They just going to come in. This is my job. I'm going to beat the hell out of you, and I'm going to go home. And that's, I applaud that, because I think if that would have been done, that tactic right now would be being done across the country right now, we wouldn't have this issue. It wouldn't be nobody tearing down anything.
I tell people, I'm going to let Zoya get on, but I tell people all day, it's a privilege to be a police officer, and it's something that you have to re-up every day. That authority, that honor to wear the badge is something that you have to earn every day. You don't earn it just because you got through 6 months in the academy. You don't earn it because you did something a year ago. Every day you go out there, you have to uplift who you are and the pledge that you make. And it's something that you do every day. And when officers, for whatever reason, fail to do that, we see what we see in the streets. It's not easy, but it's something we have to do every day.
Yeah. Also, in addition to what Steve is saying, we have to get out of this mentality where there's a us against them. Okay. And it goes from both sides. I think when you have a us against them mentality, whether it's law enforcement or the community, then there's always gonna be that friction. So as I said, the uniform comes with honor. So you have to understand that I cannot have that us against them mentality. But if one officer has that mentality, times that by how, all the cops you have in the command or wherever, then that becomes a problem. Because one of the things that we see, or that has transpired throughout history is the culture. You got to kind of be in the organization to kind of also help with changing the culture of what we've seen throughout history. And in order to do that, you have to be willing to say, hey, I'm going to go against this. I'm going to stand up against this. We can't do it like that. Because I am equally responsible for what I'm portraying out there.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, that's again another good point. What would you say are the laws that people should know to help them when they're dealing with law enforcement? So you got people out here that might respond a certain way. So what advice would you give to someone that maybe don't know how to respond? And is there a way that they should be responding?
Well, what I would say is that first thing is thank God we have these camera phones.
Mm-hmm.
And thank God for the people that are out there, and also thank God for the officers, because there are a lot of times that people will allege things that happened that didn't happen. So it's great that we have these phones out there. What I would tell people is to use them, carry them, but also understand that when you see an incident that's evolving and it doesn't look right or you're not sure, use your camera phone, but also give that police officer the distance and the room to work. Because as a police officer, it's hard to do anything if people are standing over your back with a phone in your face. So record, hold people responsible, but also understand that things are evolving. I tell people all the time. I have a story. When I was a transit commander, I used to work in Brooklyn. One of the stations that we used to patrol, not too far from Kings County Hospital, we had a lot of daytime robberies as the employees would come out the train station. So I remember one time with one of my guys, being in the vicinity, and we saw a gentleman, and we walked up to talk to him, and he was put off, like, why you coming up to me? Well, why you harassing me? And I said, sir, I just asked you a question. And I said, I asked him, I said, why are you here? He said, I'm here because they're robbing people. My wife is getting off the train. I said, I'm here too. So we looked at each other. We shared a laugh because he understood that we're here to protect them. And, I understood that he's just a hardworking man, and what he's seen before from police officers had put him off. So I tell people, you have the right to absorb what police officers do. You have the right, if you're stopped by a police officer, to ask. But I would tell them, you don't have to answer questions if a police officer stops you. If you feel it being unreasonable in the way they're handling you. But I would always say, you know what? Take down as much information as possible. If you feel that you're being stopped by a police officer is unlawful or unreasonable, and make sure we follow up. I think a lot of times we get upset in a moment, but we don't follow up. And we allow police officers to keep doing that until it blows up into something bad.
Well, one of the things I want to mention, just to, answer your question, just from my perspective, which is, I think the community can be afraid to ask for a supervisor. If there's a situation where if it's not going right, or you believe the officer is doing something unjustly, or they're not even taking your report, let's say there's a situation where there has been, there's an issue at hand, whatever type of crime it is. I would look at the Central Park situation. What would that have looked like if maybe he stayed there or got a report? Because in that situation, it is a crime to call 911 and make a false report. Okay, so in situations like that, call the cops again, get that report, because you know what, at the end of the day, it is a crime. You cannot use 911 just because you are intimidated because a Black man is there or something that's just crazy. So know your rights. Don't be afraid to call 911 again, ask for a supervisor to come, and wait on the scene, and make sure your phones, yes, are charged so you can videotape. Thank God we have cameras right now.
But I would also add to that is that get involved. As a police commander, I had so many monthly meetings, precinct council meetings, as we used to call them. And at the meetings, we'll have in a precinct that I'd have 30,000 residents. I will have 10 people. And a lot of these people were seniors. So I would say, where's the young people? You don't want to meet your local police officer when there's a situation going on. You want to know your police officer way before. And I think when people know each other, whether you're a cop or whether you're a citizen, it's hard to fight with each other if you know each other. So if that police officer is doing something wrong and he knows you're from the community council, maybe he'll, And if you are in the community and you know that police officer dealing with him, maybe you'll be that person that can step in the middle and say, hey, I know Officer Brown. He's a good guy. Officer Brown, this is my cousin or my friend. You know, he's a good kid. He just needs a little mentoring. And you could be that bridge. So I would tell people, you know, when you live in your community, there's some ownerships to living in your community. You know, you pay taxes, but you got to be involved in your community if you want to direct how public services go. But if you're not involved and you only get involved when things happen, it's kind of hard to kind of have any control during that.
Well, one of the things also, like I'm sorry, as Steve said, you know, one of the important things that we have to also support are Black executives that are in positions, and not all the time they may get positions where they can really bring about change. You know, we have to stand by them. But how you really learn who they are is by, yes, going to some of those meetings, really seeing them on the street, finding out where they are, and really take a stance to kind of help get them into the positions where they can effectively bring about the changes that we so desperately, you know, we need in the community. So,
now, Zoya, you said something. Well, part of your response was for people to know their rights. So let's say, how do someone that has no idea of what their rights are, do you guys know where someone could go to look that up? Or is it just Google it? Is there a certain site or website for someone to be able to say, okay, let me understand what my rights are, and really, you know, be able to read it and understand it and know it? That was one part. I have another part to a statement, actually. But answer that one first, if you can, please.
Yeah, the first one, pretty much you can Google it. You can go on to the penal law. There's, you know, depending on the state where you live in, we're in New York State. So New York penal law, you can look at the traffic laws and just spend time knowing the laws in which, you know, so you understand what the laws are when it comes to those particular crimes. Now, when it comes to the police department, you can also look up the patrol guide and find out different things.
Just to add that, I know when I was there on the police department, we did do seminars, or community seminars, where we did Know Your Rights. There's a lot of fraternal organizations like 101 Black in Law Enforcement, Noble. So you can reach out to some of these Black law enforcement organizations, and they would be happy to come down and do seminars. And we did seminars in the precinct where we would, you know, talk to the community about knowing your rights if you were stopped by the police officers, knowing your rights if police officers responded. So we also told them how they can make a complaint, CCRB. So CCRB is also another entity that you can reach out to. They could come out, they can talk about your rights and how to file a complaint. You can also reach out to Civil Liberties. They also do seminars. So there's a lot of organizations. They have lawyers, they have police officers or ex-police officers, and they would be happy to come out, you know, if you have groups of people, and they would talk about dealing with encounters with police officers to keep it positive.
And you know, and this is actually kind of funny how Steve is saying this, because this is really the difference that you see in leadership. You know, I can speak from a patrol level, and Steve can actually speak from that executive level, and that's where it becomes a very unique kind of story, because now patrol, you know, you're dealing with things as it's occurring, so they are as well, but at the same time they have more than managerial type of response as well.
Okay, all right, yes. We were speaking about the camera. Steve, you said something before about people to, you know, they should be recording when certain things happen, you know, but to give the cops space so they could do their job, etc. Now, I interviewed a friend of mine just last week who her daughter's father was murdered by a police officer. Okay, he's still working. He's still on the field. One of the questions that I asked her was, how does she feel about the body cameras? And I asked her that because he had one on, and it didn't do anything for her. So, what do you say to something like that? Because like her comment was, because when I asked her, she said, well, all it does is make people aware, but then it's almost like it just stops right there. People see it, they're aware, but nothing don't happen. So let's say someone has that recording, like, how do you feel about situations like that where, okay.
Yeah, for example, because Eric Gardner was on tape, that.
Well, I mean, listen to me. That comes down to beyond policing. That's a fundamental society. This is where it comes into policies. What are the policies that are being set for by our leaders? So if you do have things that are on video, are they going to be prosecuted? Do we need a special prosecutor? Is the relationships between the prosecutors, the local prosecutors, and the local police too friendly where they can't be objective? So do we need New York State? They have the state attorney general prosecute cases involving death by police officers because of that relationship between the local prosecutor and the police. What I would say about body cam, and I've always told people, they're never going to be the end all, because body cams, depending on each police department, when do you turn a body cam on? When do you not turn a body cam on? Obviously, if a police officer has a body cam on 24 hours a day, they're not going to have it on all the time, because if you go into the bathroom, you're not going to have it on. If you're dealing with a complainant that don't want to be on camera, then they have the right to tell you to turn it off, especially in domestic situations where you don't want everything that happens in your life to play out on body cameras. Right. If the police officer has it off and somebody runs by with him with a gun, he's not going to think about turning the camera on. He's just going to go chase. So sometimes, or if you have close contact between a police officer and a suspect, you're really not going to see much. You're going to hear some grappling, and you're going to see his body press against another person. So sometimes the body cameras are great, but sometimes you may not get that much from it. So that's why I do implore people to videotape. Just do it from a safe distance, because we don't want you to get hurt. God forbid, officer discharges his weapon, or a perpetrator discharges his weapon, or anybody they're dealing with. Or we don't want the police officer to see someone behind him, don't realize you're videotaping, and now you end up involved in the melee. So I do think, 5-10 feet, you can, in these sophisticated phones, you can zoom in and you can get what's needed. So, I will say that. But going back to the overall question, if the video's there and police officers are not being held accountable, that goes beyond the police department. It goes beyond what policies we put forth and how society thinks of it as a whole. Goes back to what I said at the beginning. Police officer is the byproduct of how society feels about race. If people, and we're going to find out in this case. Remember, you got to have 12 people that agree for this officer to be convicted. So remember, if we got people in Central Park calling and say, I'm going to say you're African American male, it is these implicit biases that we have, that everyone has, especially when it comes to race, that plays out. If a person is brought up in the suburbs and they're not really around people of color, and for the first 20 years of their life, and you bring them into the academy, you can't wash that out in 6 months, because when they're under pressure, when their emotions go up, the things that they've heard, this person's an animal, this person has superhuman strength, they're animalistic. That's what's going to come out. And that's what we deal with in trying to hold people responsible for their actions.
Okay.
I'm going to say this, after speaking to y'all have changed my mind about it, because I used to think, honestly, I always felt like there was no such thing as a good cop, because as long as there was a bad cop and nobody said anything to the bad cop, you was just as guilty. So after speaking to y'all, I've changed my, it makes me feel, I feel a different perspective on it now,
And that's why I think conversations like this need to be had, and it needs to be out there, because again, I think the gap between police officers and the people in the community is getting further and further away. And I don't really see, I don't know. I don't see anything happening where people are trying to fix the problem. And like Ray said, like for me, like when I heard you say, well, you made a statement and you said, what did you say? Oh my God, I'm trying to remember. Like you not doing something. I mean, like recording, but staying a certain distance, and people shouldn't do certain things. In my mind, I'm like, no, I think that people need to start fighting the police back. You know, because I'm thinking, you know, if we stand around, then we're just going to sit there and keep letting them kill us on the street and we do nothing. I feel, and this is just me being transparent, like some police officers, they take the, you know, that badge and that uniform and they use it to bully people. They use it, it's like the bully in the street. So now you know that people are afraid of you when they see you because you don't have that relationship with, okay, you know, I'm here to protect you and serve. So if you're here to protect and serve me, then why am I afraid when I see you? You know what I mean? So my thing is, no, we got to fight back. We got to fight back. And that's why, you know, in my mind and before and how I was thinking was, you know what, everything that's happening, it needs to happen. This needs to be. But at the same time, like I said, I wasn't thinking, well, what's going to happen after that? I really wasn't, you know. So
well, I think for the most part, a natural human emotion is a fight or flight mentality. Okay, so that's a natural reaction that, hey, we're going to fight against this at all costs.
Yes.
Now, I will say that going back to law enforcement, you know, we also got to understand that, you know, those that are in that same position got to deal with things every single day when they go into work. You know, not all officers are bad officers. There are some officers that are really trying every single day to bring about a change. But at the same time, we got to understand that, listen, we got to we're part of this problem if we are not going to fix these issues. And we got to change the culture. And the culture is us against them. Really, I just want to say us against them, because then what happens is that when you take on that mindset, it creates a whole nother different demon that should not even exist in the first place. And you know, it goes back to, you know, a lot of the officers. Some officers don't even live in the 5 boroughs. They may live in Orange County. You know, going back to what Steve said, you know, you get somebody, you know, I'm upstate New York, so you be upstate. There's some people that never really came into encounter with Black people or Hispanic people, and their reaction is completely different. And that's something that we have to change. Officers that are within the organization, you got to change that.
Well, one of the things I would say is that, you know, Ray, you made a great point, you know, and really that's the moment. You can't be a good cop if you let bad cops survive or do things. So you have to always, you know, and sometimes, hey, you know, people get stressed. It's a stressful job. I remember I was watching a protest yesterday, and there was a cop, and I think guy was not listening, and he was getting in their face, and it was a plainclothes cop, and they were pushing each other. And I remember a uniform cop tapped the plainclothes cop on the shoulder and said, "I got this," and he got in between them. And sometimes we have to be able to do that in these type of stressful jobs. We have to look out for each other to make sure that we don't do things in the spur of the moment that will haunt us and society forever. I always tell my cops, especially the cops that worked at midnights when I addressed them for roll call, I said, listen, you guys have awesome responsibilities. And the things that you do in the middle of the night can affect this city and this world for years to come. And all it takes is one police officer. You know, that one police officer, the amount of hurt, the amount of damage that he's done to relationships and just property from his one incident. You know, we're going to probably be billions of dollars because of one person's actions. So what I say to you, Teresa, is that I really don't want people to get involved with cops and you know, but because it's dangerous. You don't know what's underneath that. If that person has a weapon, if the cop has a weapon, now you end up getting hurt. But when officers do things wrong, society has to hold them responsible. And that's the only way we're going to have people really believe that you know, this is justice. And if we don't do that, if the powers that be, if the prosecutor don't hold this officer responsible, then we're gonna struggle as a society. We're gonna struggle.
Yes. It's funny you say that, because you had, like, I was thinking one way at this time, like, you know, we need to fight them back. We need to do this. They're killing us. And then on the other hand, like, I got friends who are still police officers and friends who are families and sons are in the police field. And now I'm talking to them, and now my thing is, oh my God, I don't want to see nothing happen to them. So now it's a struggle now between, tell them don't you wear a uniform, because you know what I go back to now, the uniform, because I know that person in that uniform that I know is not like that, and I don't want to see nothing happen to them. So it's, you know, that it's that struggle between you know, trying to do the right thing, trying to fight back, but then not wanting, you know, people to get hurt that you care about. It's so many different mixed feelings.
But one of the things I say is that why do we a lot of times advocate some of the most important responsibilities to other people? You know, think about it. What do we give police officers? We give them an enormous amount of responsibility and power. Ultimately, a police officer has the ability to take your life. They have the ability to disrupt your life. You know, I could come into the house, I can make a determination that you're an unfit parent, and I could remove your child. And you could spend thousands of dollars trying to get that child back. I can go in and arrest your husband because I believe he did something. So why do we advocate that responsibility so much to other people? We need more of our people involved, you know, in policing, but especially policing, because it's such an intimate responsibility that we turn over to police officers to really come in and make such critical decisions in our life. And I don't think we need to leave that up to groups of people that may not have our best interests at heart.
And here's another thing that I just thought about. It's important that even within law enforcement, you know, when you climb these ranks, or just as an officer, we got to also be in position to know someone in the media, know other people that are of color, that are in different positions, so we can also get out our narrative, you know, because oftentimes, you know, who's controlling the narrative? Like, who's controlling what's being shown on TV, you know, or in the papers? So at the same time, you know, if there's an issue that, you know, you're a person of color, you're a Black person, you're Hispanic, you want to listen, this stuff exists. We can't go around saying that it doesn't exist. You know, we both have different experiences that we've gone through on the job. Me personally, I went through a lot of stuff, but I'm not going to sit here and say that these things don't exist, because they exist. And, you know, officers and executives, you got to be able to have that platform to tell your story. But at the same time, we need other people to help us tell that story too, which means that don't be afraid to go up to that officer, hey, listen, I work with the media. Here go my number. Here go my card. You ever need somebody? Don't be afraid to go up to them and offer that information, and they'll do the same. And then you create that bond.
You know, I think Zoya is right. I think that, you know, the ability to tell your story and to be able to get it out. And I think that's great with social media. We have the ability to do that because the police departments are like any other corporation or entity. They're going to protect their image, and they're going to hold things within, and they're going to craft the image. And anybody that threatens that, they're going to go after them. So to have places where people of color, or just people who have issues that need to come to light, can get that out is very important. So media like yours is very important to get that out, because the community needs to understand that relationship they have to have with their local police. Because until we find a different way, you know, policing is just how it's going to be here. So we have to have these relationships. These are things that we can't wait until we have these type of situations for us to really investigate that. So we need to create these forums where information can get out. You know, I always told people, I said, you know, as a police department or in the city government, you know, a lot of decisions are made basically to protect the organization. They're made economically. So, you know, we went through the 90s with a lot of broken window policing. Broken window policing was to improve the city so we can raise real estate. We can it's about dollars and cents. They understood to some point stop and frisk was violating people's rights, but it was keeping crime down, and it was improving the real estate of New York City. So it was a necessary evil, because the city was standing to make more money than they would lose in lawsuits. So a lot of this has an economic component that we see out there.
Yes.
I appreciate you guys. I'm gonna say that, you know, to even have this conversation with y'all. Like I said, it helped me look at it in a different perspective than I was looking at it, you know.
Yeah, it's definitely, and that hopefully this can, when other people see it, it can do the same thing for them, because that's the purpose. Because trust me, on my first interview, I was angry. And even still being angry, sometimes it's good to hear someone who was on the other end, because now you get a different perspective of how, you know, how things are, and it's a different light on how to look at certain things, you know. But when you're coming from a place of hurt, you know, you're going to respond that way. You know what I mean? So that's just basically how it is. But I do have one thing that I want to bring up. Well, not bring up, but mention that you guys said, and I agree with. And I know, Zoya, you said this plenty of times. We need to have our people in there, you know, that look like us, working in these buildings, right? So working in police and law enforcement, people telling our stories, etc. But this is the question that I have, having our people in these buildings, working in the police station, someone to tell our story who can identify with us and understand where we're coming from. The part that troubles me is, what about the people that get in there that look like us and forget? What about the people who get in there and become Zoya? I'm looking at the camera, right? So it looks like I'm looking at her eyes, but when I look down and I see her going like this. Okay, yeah, you know, but no. What about those people? Because we gotta be honest, we gotta be transparent, and we gotta be realistic with things that's going on here. So listen, everybody that look like us is not going to get in there and do what we expect them to do. So that's a whole nother battle that we have to deal with. So, you know, it almost makes us feel like, okay, so someone's in there and it still ain't working out. So how do we deal with that?
I think Steve kind of answered it when he said we hold them accountable. You know.
Let me hear Zoya.
Steve, you know, as soon as that came on and went to 5% or 4, he's like, okay, I'm gonna go get. Steven's got a couch on a charger thing. Girl, it's a good one. Listen, I tell people, I'm from Brooklyn at the end of the day. And what that means is that sometimes you got to call a spade a spade. And there's a lot of spades. Listen, I think what happens is that, like anything else, whether it be law enforcement or any corporation, I think what happens is that we get in positions and somehow we forget, whether it be climbing ranks or the money aspect, or we get comfortable because, you know what, I'm good, my family's good, and you know what, I'm not going to change this, it's not my issue. And that is really a problem, and it's unfortunate because there are some officers, there are some executives that are that way. And I'm not going to sit here and say it doesn't exist, because yes, it exists. But at the same time, I also know that there are very good executives that are in positions that can really bring about a change. But you know what the question is? What? Do the people in positions really want them to change the issues that we really go through? This is why it's important to go to those community meetings. When you're at those community meetings, you're going to find out who's who. And when you're there, you have enough common sense within yourself to say, he's good, or he's not, or vice versa. But you're going to see them in action. And then when you see them in action, you have to know that, you know what, I got to stand behind them. I got to, you know, I play a role in this to help get them to that position. But now guess what? When they're in that position, and if they're not doing what they need to, you need to hold them accountable too.
Yeah. You know, what I say to that is that there isn't any one savior. You know, any person could be tempted, especially a person that didn't have much and now they have something. They can be easily tempted. But it's like what Zoya said. You know what? It's not one person. It has to be many persons. And we also, as a community, has to educate ourselves to what's going on. We have to learn about policing. You know, one of the great things about the police department, we have civilian academies. We actually brought civilians in and we taught them the police curricula. We talked about social science. We talked about police law. You know, we told them about some of the things. So you can have a greater understanding, so you can hold police officers responsible. So if you don't understand what's going on, it's hard to hold people responsible. But if you understand crime stats, if you understand, you know, how we compile our numbers, if you understand how we come up with different policies that the city pushes and we look to push, So we don't have stop and frisk, so we don't have broken windows, how we try to do it better. Those are the things that you can hold someone responsible. Remember, the police officer works for you just like anybody else. And if they're not doing a good job, then we get rid of them and we look for other people and we hold them responsible.
And here's another thing that I'm going to say, and this is honest. We cannot put ourselves, when we get into position or even before that position, to place ourselves in compromising situations. And then I say compromising, meaning that there are things that people may do because, listen, if I'm a supervisor, I could do whatever I want to do because I'm a supervisor. And there's things that go on internally that maybe a lot of people don't know about. When that happens, you change the narrative. It becomes hard to now be the supervisor because now how can you supervise while you over here doing this? And now you may climb ranks or whatever may happen, but you know what? You become compromised to an extent. So I think that is an issue because we can't get sidetracked with what's going on. We can't get to these positions and then forget about the work that has to be done. Because then we lose the battle. You know, you're losing the battle. You can't, how can you speak about this or lead this, but yet these people over here got this information on you?
Mm-hmm.
I got a question. Whenever the cops do something wrong, you always have the police union jump in. Do they actually play a role on why the police departments do what they do? Because they know that the police union basically picks the people they want in office. And I see a lot of times the union, like what happened with I think the guy who killed Eric Gardner, Joe Paul. Yeah. The police union went crazy when they decided to fire him. And is that an issue also that affects the police department in a way?
Well, I would say that it's an issue. I would say it probably plays out more because of the demographics outside of New York City than inside of New York City, where police unions in smaller precincts or more Caucasian precincts would have a greater influence. And New York City is more diverse, so I don't think they have that much of an influence on public opinion, but they do have influence on how cops see the people they're working for, so they can influence young cops. And our jobs as supervisors is to keep police officers motivated. It's difficult to go out and police when you see police officers being arrested, but you have to let police officers know if you're a good police officer, you understand the necessity for bad police officers to be arrested and to be prosecuted, because that makes your job easier and makes your job safer. So yeah, you know what? A union is going to do what a union does. Their job is to protect their job is to protect the people that they that hire them. So they're going to protect the police officer just like the Teamsters are going to protect the truck drivers. But it's us as people, whether we be the civilians or we be management, to understand that that's not what we're going to listen to when we make these decisions.
And here's another thing, because again, we both have different perspectives, and I agree with what Steve is saying, but I also understand that unions are going to do what they do, and a part of what they do. And again, I really want to see other officers speak out on this, because I'm just one person, and I went through my own stuff with the union. But again, there's that color issue there. Okay, they will do what they do for all to an extent, And there are other issues that go on with unions that they will reach out to more, other people. I mean, they'll do other things for some people as opposed to the others. And I really want to see more people that are within it to speak on it, because those are issues that affect you're in there. And yeah, the union can control the narrative when it comes to what's happening and standing up, yes. But there are other issues inside that
well, you know what? It actually brings me back to what I said when we started this. Race is an aspect of every part of our life. So whether you talk about unions or you talk about management, race, we saw this pandemic where we saw African Americans were more at risk. We saw how many African Americans were turned away at hospitals because they probably didn't have a bed for them or they didn't have a ventilator. You know, the problem is that race plays a part in the decision making in every aspect of our life. So it plays a part in policing. And until we have that real conversation about race, it's going to be hard to change a lot of things.
And here's another thing that, you know, as Steve is speaking on this, we also got to get people of color in the unions, those unions that are there, because what you'll find is that the ratio is not good at all. So how can you really control the storyline if you're not in it?
Right. I wanted to comment to a couple of things. Zoya, when you were talking about the people in the union being in there, well, both of y'all anyway. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I feel is it also goes back to morals in the individual. You know, you just got to really be a good person, because evil don't even have no color. You know what I mean? There's good and bad in everybody. So I think these people in these positions, you know, people, they should really see like what they're about. I like the way that I feel, and I spoke about this last time, is that we gotta, you know, really get in and vote the people in that we feel is beneficial for our community. And I'm to the point where I even feel that way about police officers. Like, maybe this cop shouldn't be able to work in my community if they're not voted in, if the only thing they can come in and do is be aggressive and don't know how to de-escalate. You know what I mean? So I feel, you know, that's the way I feel with that situation. As far as as far as race is concerned, because you guys were speaking about race, I think that it's a conversation, Steve, that needs to happen. But I think that people are uncomfortable with talking about it. I think no one wants to talk about race. So I can sit here and have a conversation with somebody who's white and feel some kind of way, because I kind of want to know, like, why do you think the way you think?
The only people uncomfortable with it is white people. White people are the only ones. I'm not even getting around the bush. White people are the only ones uncomfortable
oh my God.
about race.
Well, you know what?
As soon as you say race, they think you're talking about them specifically, you know? And that's where they get uncomfortable.
I would say that white people, and even some of us minorities that have gotten comfortable, it's like, hey, don't disturb it. I'm good. I got my house. I got my. So what we have to understand is that, you know, and I talk to my friends that are white, you know, it's about, you know, listen to me. It's hard to talk about, but the reality is that you were given an unjust place in life. You know, so, you know, you started off 50 yards ahead of me in life. Through no actions of your own, by the oppression of my people, and you know you can't look over that, you know, and that affects every part of life, you know. So when we talk about, you know, why Black people suffer or we are stuck in poverty, we can understand it. It dates back slavery, post-slavery. It dates back to veterans coming back from the war. And white veterans were given free homes and jobs, and Black veterans were said good luck. And you look back, and you know, one of the most important ability to gain wealth is property. And if you look at that, you know, whites were given homes, and Black people were given nothing. So you go 3 generations later, and you talk about why the wealth gap. The wealth gap is that we don't own anything. And when we try to own things, it's made difficult through the interest rates that we have to pay for homes versus whites have to pay. So it affects every aspect of life. So when you think about it, and if you're white and you're realistic about it, you are kind of nervous because you know you were given an unfair advantage, and it's hard to talk about that.
And here, just to telling on what you were saying, we got to go back to, you know, again, that meeting, going to the precincts and getting the executives that we need to patrol our commands, okay? Because when you control your command, people of color, having black man or Black woman that's there in that command, in that area, you can control the narrative when it comes to what cops do, because now they're going to let it be known, okay, this is not to be tolerated. They're going to hold them accountable. So the question when it comes to, what do I do, or how, if they're this way, then you know what, you can go to that executive at that community meeting and say, listen, this is the issue that I'm having with this officer on a constant basis. And why is he here? And you can put pressure on that person. But at the same time, if we are not in that position with that command, we're expecting another culture to care about something that's so deeply, that concerns us. And that may be a little bit different because, again, you may live somewhere else. You may not understand the issues of what's going on in the community. Not the way it is, for someone like us.
Right.
Now, I got a question, because it was my understanding. I don't know how, if they still implementing it now, but I know a while back they were requiring cops to actually live in the city to work for the police department. Do they still do that? And I know they weren't saying that, like the cops who had already had homes outside of New York City were grandfathered in, but all new police officers had to live in the city. Do they still do that, or that's done?
No, police officers, they can live in the city, and they can live in the surrounding counties. They can live in Suffolk, Nassau, Rockland County, Orange County, and Westchester and Putnam. So they can live in New York City and surrounding counties. They can't live in Jersey. So, those are some of the issues that, you need police officers that come from the community that can understand and have empathy for the community. Sometimes it's not, it's not always a reality. As a police department, you want the police department to be able to search for the best and the brightest. But, I think there's a lot of great young people in the city that, given the opportunity and given the right mentoring, they can come on the job and they can do incredible things. And it just goes back to, once again, how much do we as a society want to change lives? Because if we go out there and we set paths so young people can understand about policing, understand about the things that they get, it's a great job, and it gives you a lot of benefits. Me and my wife, we're retired, we're in our 40s, and we're able to take care of our family. And I think that's one of the basic things that any person wants to do. They want to be able to take care of their own. And through this job, we were able to do that. So there are great benefits with this job, but we got to get it out to the people and let them know.
But, I do believe, young people, I understand, having the mindset of, okay, it's us against them, when it shouldn't be, because, at the end of the day, we need young minority people, Black, Hispanic, to come onto this job, climb the ranks, because, if we're not in it, if you're not in it, how can you can change it from the outside. We could talk about the things that we see happening right now, but at the same time, go on a job, change, let it become what you see it becoming. I said, my story is also very unique. I said, I came on this job because I remember when I was 8 years old and my mother went through domestic violence, and cops came to the door and pretty much turned a blind eye. Like, you know what? Yeah, you standing there all bloody, but you know what? That's your problem. And turned around and walked away. But, I remember seeing what that did to me when I was 8 years old. And I said, you know what? Not again, not on my watch. And that's why I came on the job. So it has nothing to do with, okay, about the money. It was like, how do we change this? And, in order to change it, you need more of us to come on.
Well, I'm going to be honest. It's something about the money, because for any group of people, you need financial security. For us to transform communities, there need to be head of households that financially can take care of households. Remember, these jobs are transformative. The people that had these jobs behind it, the Irish groups, they came, they took these jobs, and their kids, they were bus drivers, they were firemen, they were police officers. They were able to transform their communities, and now they're cops, now their children are the doctors and the lawyers. So these type of jobs are important to every community as they climb the American ladder to success. Because if we can't provide for us, our family, how can we change anything? So it's very important that people come into these jobs, and it's called economic empowerment. So it's very important.
Now,
I got
okay.
one that, oh,
Right,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
now I have one question because we when Zoya was saying, you know, for us to get involved. Now me and you, Steve, I had spoke to you about this before. I actually took the police department the test to become a police officer straight out of high school. And my understanding was I was in the top 1% of the people who took the test. And they still found a way not to hire me. So how do you say that? What do you say to people that happened to? Because that's how I ended up in the military, because I didn't get the job that I wanted.
Yeah,
I was one of them guys who wanted to be a police officer.
Yeah, we both got different. And Steve's going to give you his view, and then I'm going to give you my view because my story is kind of interesting.
Well, one of the things that people gotta understand, once again, you know, these are some of the most desirable jobs in civic employment, to be a police officer, to be a fireman. So of course they put every obstacle in front of African Americans to make sure we didn't get on the job. They say you could be a correction officer, you can be a bus driver, but you can't be a police officer. And when I came on the job, probably around the same time you came on the job, one of the biggest ways they were able to stop us was through the psychological test. They were deeming a lot of African Americans and Hispanics unfit. With me, they tried to do it through medical and said there was something with my heart. So my mother at that time had to spend $2,000. We're talking about early '90s to a single mom spend that much money and to have a doctor certify that I was okay. So there were a lot of obstacles. Even the last 10 years, they were doing credit checks. They're doing credit checks on people that are strong. Of course, we don't have a mom to give us a credit card when we come out of high school. As soon as we get out of high school, we go to junior college to get the 60 college that you say we need. Of course, we're going to get into a little bit of problem with our credit because we don't have people to bail us out. So they were using that as an obstacle. So they were challenged. They were sued. So one of the things that we have to do is that people on the job, these organizations, they have to sue the department and challenge them when they put up these rules that are just meant to make sure that minorities don't get on the job.
So now, my perspective with it is, you know, most people, some know that, you know, I went through 2 police academies, you know, and the reason why is because the first police academy that was back in, I don't know, I forgot the year, I think it was 02 or 03 or something like that. But anyway, actually it's like shortly after 9/11. But long story short, I was one of the first classes where it was a lot of minorities. And with that, they also changed the exams where they did a curve, where you curve all the exams into one exam and then it has to be a certain score. Long story short, I was off by 2 points. What happened at that time, they came into the classroom. It was about 30 of us or 40 of us. I forgot the number, but more than 30. And majority of the people in there were Black. So my story is this, you know, coming on to the police department when it was right after 9/11, about a year later, I went into 2 police academies and excuse me, long story short, my first police academy was quite interesting. I say that because that was one of the classes where they had the highest number of Blacks coming onto the job and Hispanics. Now, it was good in a sense, but then it was bad in another sense. And I say another sense because that was the same time where they restructured the exams. You know, all of a sudden we come on and now all of a sudden you guys are restructuring the whole entire exam. And that exam consisted of a curve, meaning that you take 3 different exams and depending on where you are, you have to fit within this curve. But I was off by 2 points. Quite a few of us was off by a decent amount of points. It was like over like 40 of us or something like that. They pretty much had brought us out of the classroom, put us in another classroom. There was only one white officer that was in there who they actually had him come out of the classroom. What they told him, I don't know, never seen him again. They came back in there and told us, hey, you guys didn't do well on that exam, and if you don't leave, you guys can be fired and never work again for the city. Because what they expressed to us was that our names were written down on a paper, they call it a 49 report, that went all the way to, I think it was a police commissioner or some, you know, at that time. And it said, basically, if you don't leave now, then once he signs off on it, you guys can run the risk of being fired and never working for the city again. So,
okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Mm-hmm.
so the response was pretty much, you know, if you guys, because your name is on this list,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't leave by the time he signs off on it, you guys can run the risk of being terminated and never working for the city again. So at that time, you know, naturally, I'm like, what do we do? I call my husband. You know, obviously he's telling me, oh, I don't think they're going to do that. Long story short, but it's like, what do you do? Because now if I get fired, I can never work for the city again. But quite a few of us, over 30 of us, pretty much all of us, I think it was only 8 of them that actually stayed. We pretty much made the decision to leave. But the very next day, they told everyone else that stayed, they gave them a second test. Okay, so, but the point became, what do I do? It took me about 4 years or 3 years, something like that, in order to come back to try to be reinstated. But another long story, I had to take the exam again. I had to do everything all over again just for them to tell me, oh, we could have reinstated you. So I'm like, oh, okay, so for the last 3 years, you guys told me a lie. So eventually I came back on a job, but it took me close to 4 years just to get back on. So my point is, to answer the question, if you want it, you got to believe in it, and you got to strive for it, and understand that the situation is much bigger than yourself. Yeah. And in order to change it, you have to kind of see it for what it is and know that you play a role in changing it. But to try to change it from the outside, yeah, we can change some things, but we got to be willing to go in and fix it.
Yes, yes, yes. Wow. That was a lot that you had to endure and go through, but I really commend you for not giving up and really setting an example, because you obviously had a purpose for why you wanted to do it. And, you know, I think that, you know, that example is something that people should know and should see. You know what I mean?
What I wanted to say, I think we all play a part. The people that got on the job, the people that tried and didn't get on the job, we all stand on each other's shoulders. When you understand change, it doesn't happen right away. And there are a lot of people that, you know, didn't make it to the finish line, but they played a part. And if they didn't play a part, we wouldn't be able to get to where we're at. So we all stand on each other's shoulders. Right. You know, you going out there, Ray, you trying, I'm going out there. And we created that momentum for people to examine these and see why this is happening, so the next generation that gets on is not as hard. So we stand on each other's shoulders.
Yeah, I actually made it all the way to the point where you got that officer who kind of structures you, and I forgot what they called him. I forgot.
Investigator.
Huh?
It's an investigator.
Yeah, I got all the way up to him where it was. I had did the physical and everything, and I decided to walk away from it, and that's how that's how I ended up joining the military. And I mean, I look back at it and I'm kind of glad, because I actually got to see more of the world than I would have been. So it played a role.
Yeah, here's another thing I wanted to talk about, because I think it's an important issue since we're on a discussion, which is going back to young people. Mm-hmm. It's important that young people understand that you have to be mindful of the relationships that you take part in. And when I say relationships, I'm talking about in terms of the women. You know, if you're a guy, it's like, listen, I'm going to date this girl. I may have this girl and she may get pregnant, or I may run around and act silly. And now all of a sudden, okay, I matured up and I want to come on to the job. Mm-hmm. Okay, we got to be realistic. Meaning, sounds good, but then what happens when that girl gets in her feeling and wants to make a police report against you?
Right.
And now it puts you in a compromising situation to where that same investigator now has to investigate you, and depending on what that woman said at that time can determine whether or not you come on a job. And that becomes something that young people have to understand, that domestic violence is serious. Pay attention to who you are getting into a relationship with, so that it doesn't alter coming onto the job. Pay attention to traffic violations. Like Steve said, credit. These are things that can also affect you with coming onto the job.
I think what Zoya's saying, she makes a great point, is that where we're at, when we're 17 and 16, is not necessarily where we're at in mind frame when we're 25. And it's very important that we have mentors during those ages to tell us, you want to have a career in law enforcement. You ain't gonna have a career in law enforcement if you have domestic violence reports, which we call DIRs. Well, now you're not gonna have a career in law enforcement if you have DWIs and you started learning that you drinking. You're not gonna have a career in law enforcement if you're having petty early arrest. So it's those things that, if we have to mentor our young people, because it's these indiscretion of youth that maybe other groups could get away with, that we can't get away with. And a lot of people, especially like Zoya said, when it comes to these issues with girlfriends and stuff like that, I mean, you got 3 different reports from 3 different girlfriends. No one's going to give you a gun to carry because that's a liability for the organization. You've shown that you have problems dealing in relationships. So these are the little things that sometimes when we don't mentor our young people and they don't think about it until they're ready to get that job, that real job, and now they find out that they can't get it now.
And here's another part. Turnstile. Nobody thinks about, when you're young and you're jumping that turnstile. You may have gotten a ticket that maybe you overlooked for maybe 10 years, 15 years. Like, oh, you never even thinking about that. And now maybe that same ticket turned into a warrant.
Yeah.
And now you might be okay for all that time because you never had a police incident. But guess what? That same ticket can turn around and hurt you later on, and you're like, oh my goodness, that was 15 years ago. But guess what? It may have turned out to a warrant, and now you're in a situation where you never knew that because they're not gonna send you the information at your house all the time. It's like a creditor. All of a sudden, it's like you get something in the mail for like last week. All of a sudden, what? All of a sudden, it got to the credit agency already.
I can't say.
Now you have 4 million. Come on now.
The funny thing is, though, I actually had 2 summonses when I grew up as a young person, jumping the turnstile, I got disorderly conduct summons on the train with my football team. We're coming from football practice, and this young police officer, she was going through the train, and I guess one of the guys said, "Yo, hey, good looking," and all we know, she got on that radio. And that train stopped. We were all on the wall, And the summons were thrown out because the judge went. She said he gave you a summons for that, but come on the police department, that became an issue. And I didn't realize that those were actually counted as arrests because of criminal summonses. So when the investigator said, "Well, you got to write something for those arrests," I said, "Arrest? I wasn't arrested. I just gave him a summons." He said, "No, those are criminal summonses." So it was shocking to me, and that those little, what you call things that little kids do, and how when we talk about criminalizing young people, this is how it starts. Remember Mike Brown, and when you looked at St. Louis, so that part of town where they looked at the community, and most of all the summonses were going to the Black community. So not only were they criminalizing the Black community, but financially they were ruining them because they were given all the summonses that they needed to give. They were getting it from the Black community. So you have Black people, you can't pay the summons. After you get a couple of those summons, you get warrants. You can't get jobs because now it's affecting you. So the criminalization and taking wealth from the Black community. These are all issues that need to be examined.
And also, traffic violations. You would never think that traffic violations play a role, but you get a few traffic violations, it all adds up to something. And another thing young people got to consider is this thing called guilty by association. Be very careful with the people that you're associating with, because now if you're with someone and they go out and steal something, and now all of a sudden it's a petty larceny or grand larceny, or now you your friend robbed somebody, but just so happened you were with him. How's that gonna work? So because now you got to articulate that. And how do you articulate that? And now once you articulate it, check that box, you're no good. You know, we don't want you. So there's just a lot of issues to really consider, but you know, you got to think about it while you're young. Also.
Zoya, I'm so glad you used the word guilty by association, right? Because that is the same. That was my perspective on bad police officers when it came to good police officers. When people go, "Oh, why are you lumping us all into one group?" And, you know, that's how I looked at it. Y'all guilty by association because you got bad cops, but nobody's doing anything about it. So when when a cop walks up on somebody, they don't know if they're dealing with a good cop or a bad cop. So their attitude is treating everybody like the bad cop.
Well, here's the thing. One of the, you know, oh man, this, you know, I've said this time and time again. As an officer, you have to remember, I'm not going to take it personal. It is the uniform. They don't know me, but on top of that, what else can I do in a situation? Guess what? I can repeat the transmission. So if I'm in a situation to where I pull over someone, or let's say a robbery happened, or now all of a sudden the guy has on a white t-shirt, blue jeans, black sneakers. Okay, there might be about 50 people walking by in Harlem that got the same doggone thing on. But guess what? If I pull you over, I have, you know, repeat the transmission. It's not going to hurt you to say, you know what, I understand how you feel, but I'm going to go ahead and repeat the transmission of the description. Okay? On that radio. Once you do it, you kind of fit the description. So now I'm going to talk to you. And really, that has to be that understanding.
Well, I think one of the things is that we teach people the different levels of criminality. You know, you got mere suspicion, where a police officer may suspect criminal activity, but he doesn't have a reason to stop you. Then you have you can bump it up until where you get to probable cause. Probable cause is what you need to make an arrest. So there's different levels to take that up. So we explain to people that, you know, a police officer, we hire the police officers to look out for the community. So if you see someone coming out with a TV at 12 o'clock at night, that's may raise your suspicion. It doesn't mean that there's criminality, because some people want to move late at night because there's not a lot of people out there. But we expect our police officers to at least inquire. Now, you bump it up to where it becomes reasonable suspicion, where reasonable suspicion level means I can stop you and I can conduct an investigation, because the time of day, maybe there have been complaints about burglaries. That gives me more of a reason to stop and conduct a short-term investigation. Now, from there, the last level is probable cause. Now, probable cause means I have enough to take you and arrest you because I can satisfy criminally that you committed a crime. So it's being able to teach people those different levels of how a police officer can encounter you, and when a police officer can stop you, and when a police officer can make an arrest. And I like to, you know, the biggest thing is about educating people on the jobs that police officers do. So the more they understand about it, then they're like, all right, you know, a lot of it is that people just understand it in the job that they do. And, you know, us as police officers understand it. To take someone, even to stop someone, you know, that's hard for people. You know, no one wants to be stopped and to be suspected of a crime. So we have to understand as police officers what we're doing and the effects it has on people.
And one last point, I guess, to tap into what Steve is saying. I do believe we have to measure things as it fits the crime. I know we spoke about this earlier or very briefly. You know, if we look at George Floyd or Eric Garner, you know, what do they have in common? It was cigarettes. You know, one is selling cigarettes, the other one, you know, it has to fit the same, you know, these are things that we see, and then there's this extra level of aggression that comes where it's like, you know, that to me is horrible. And we have to kind of understand that poverty is an issue. These social issues in a community are issues. And as an officer, all officers, it doesn't matter if you're black or white, you got to be understanding to the issues at hand. So if someone's selling loose leaf or cigarettes, yeah, it's a quality of life issue. Yeah, it's an issue, but you know what? Am I gonna raise it to the level as if somebody's robbing a store?
Right.
No, I'm not gonna. No, I think we also see something in transit. I mean, I'm still. I got to go back and do the research.
Well, what I like to call it the crime of poverty. A lot of these issues are centered around poverty. People are poor. People do things when they're poor. So whether it be selling Lucy's, if you're Eric Gardner, whether it be George Floyd, he was unemployed. I heard. I'm not sure. Maybe he needed a job. A lot of these issues stem from poverty and people being in distress situation, and how we as police officers handle that. Do you use that empathy and discretion that you have? Someone is poor, they may do things that the normal person wouldn't do. What we're seeing right now, we have 40 million Americans that don't have jobs. So if you turn on the TV, you see people stealing stuff. People are hurting right now.
Not to mention losing
So
family in light of
people
COVID-19.
and people are scared. Even people that traditionally wouldn't be in this situation, they're scared now because they don't have a job, and some of those jobs may not come back. So we have a different level of depression and paranoia that's going on in the streets right now.
That is so true.
I got a
That's
question.
a really good point too, because people are. I'm sorry, I just want to say just a simple fact. Poverty pays. It's one of the underlying factors of what's going on right now, and people are in distress. People are losing their family members to coronavirus. Nobody knows what tomorrow is going to be like, and if you don't know how you're going to support yourself and your family and eat, all of those things are creating mental issues, and now we have this on top of all of that. So those are really good points, because people should be understanding to a situation like that when they're approaching someone.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I got a question for y'all now, because Steve, you brought up the reasons cops can stop somebody, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I've seen a lot of times where cops stop somebody and really only charge them with resisting arrest.
Mm-hmm.
I've always understood resisting arrest not being a crime if you didn't, if you were being arrested for a crime. But resisting arrest is a crime, even though you just say, hey, like I've seen people get resisting arrest for saying, I don't even want to talk to you because I didn't do anything,
And what I call that is lazy policing. I call that police officers that pretty much did something wrong. And instead of just saying, you know what, I made a mistake. I thought, something happened that wasn't there. And we can do that as police officers. We can make mistakes. We could thought that something was going on that wasn't going on. But we get into this mind frame where we can't admit mistakes, and now we're going to charge you with disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. Usually it's disorderly conduct, because disorderly conduct could be anything. Just you disagreeing with me, acting disorderly, yelling and shouting. So it's almost like a catch-all type phrase. And I think that becomes a concern, and I'd like to tell my police officers, people can accept if you made a mistake respectfully, that, hey, you thought this was going on. We have gang fighting, and I see a group of kids, and I stop and I question them or even talk with them. They may get upset, and I explain to them, hey, you know what? We know on social media there's a fight that's getting ready to happen, but turns out that wasn't. You can talk to people, and you try to express that. Some people will be mad, but, we expect our police to go out there and police in a respectful manner. So that becomes a problem sometimes, that they use a catch-all phrase of disorderly conduct, and and they arrest you for that, and that becomes a problem, and that creates this this distrust between the community and the police officers when we become lazy in our policing.
Yeah, I mean, Steve pretty much summed it up for what I was going to say, but part of with lazy policing is just don't throw the crime on there for everything, because I have seen where officers just, I mean, listen, we're gonna throw it on there for every single arrest. I mean, seriously, just.
Well,
it's just it's unacceptable.
That became the problem with broken windows. That became the problem with stop and frisk. Stop and frisk is a good tool if it's used correctly, because it's one of the bases of policing. I have some type of probable cause that criminality may be happening, and I stop you to conduct an investigation. That's policing. We charge our police officers to say, hey, I see 4 guys surrounding a girl in a park. I don't know if something's going on. I'm going to stop these guys, speak to this girl, make sure she's not being trafficked, make sure she's not being abused. But turns out that they know each other and they were just having an argument. So it's basically, how do we do that? So one of the things that we talk about is that you can stop somebody, but it became stop and go in your pockets. And remember, there's a stop, and then there's a frisk that you do if you believe that there may be some threat to your safety. But they're not all at once. What happened is police officers started using it all together, stop and go in your pockets. Instead of stopping you, and if there is a potential that you may have a weapon that can hurt me, then I'm allowed to frisk you. It will stop and go in your pockets to see if you got something you shouldn't have. And that became illegal. So that's what hurt stop and frisk. It was being done lazily.
In addition to that, I will say, you cannot have precinct commanders use stop and frisk as a means of a quota system. Okay? That becomes a problem because now you're stopping, you're using it like if you have tickets. Like if what are the, people may say there's no quota, okay, listen, at the end of the day, some cops you got to perform. So there is this thing where you got to come in with a certain amount of activity. So, but if you start using that same tool as something else, that becomes a problem because now you're going to run into these issues that we see time and time again in our communities where people are being stopped unjustly or just, you stop one person and all of a sudden that guy go around the corner, he's being stopped again. Why is that? Because you got uniform cops, you got plainclothes cops, you got all these different cops out there and they're all out there together. So you may get stopped at one corner. You may all of a sudden get stopped again by somebody completely different. That's why repeating that transmission, hey, you gonna stop me again? Okay, I just got stopped. Okay, why you stopping me? That officer should pretty much repeat that transmission or ask them, hey, you mind repeating the transmission if you're gonna stop me? Do I fit the description of every single, like, come on.
Like I said, it goes back to teaching, teaching and policing has to be continuous from the time you leave the academy. As things change in the community, cops have to be updated, and one of the things is that, and they have to be properly supervised. We're talking about very young police officers. Most of the times, cops come on the job when they're 24 years old. The youngest is, depending on what state, you could be 20 years old and be a police officer. So it's an inordinate amount of responsibility to give a young person. And then you put them out there and some of the difficult social settings where you're dealing with poverty, you're dealing with neglect, and now you tell the police officers to go out there and police. So police officers have to be continuously trained and continuously supervised. If not, you're going to have bad results.
Well, listen, you guys, I just want to thank y'all both so much for taking the time to talk with us. I mean, everything, you guys are setting a great example for what it should be like when you are a police officer. I think y'all are very positive leaders. We need people who think like you and people who are like you on the field and in these departments, because I believe that the mindset that you have is what will bridge the gap between the community, the people in the community, and the police. I want to thank you because speaking to you guys, it really, it helped really even change my perspective on how I was looking at things, because before I spoke to you guys, I mean, look, I still try to be, reasonable with things, but again, I was coming from a place of anger, a place of hurt, and I was feeling exactly how you see those protesters. I was basically thinking exactly like them. But talking to you, it helped me see it differently and understand that there is a solution for this, and it's not that way. We could still get things done, and it doesn't have to be done that way, because we don't realize how other things is a domino effect and can affect us. Like you brought up jobs and other things that, you know, people already don't have jobs. So now we're taking away more jobs. And it's just so much that you covered, that both of y'all covered. And again, I want to thank y'all. I do have a question before we end this. I want to know from both of you, what, like right from this point on right now, do you guys plan on doing anything as far as seminars or in the community or anything like that? I'm hoping that y'all do, because I think that we need it. We need people like you guys out there. You know what I mean? So I just want to know if y'all plan on doing that, if you're doing it now. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Well, Steve, to speak about with his, well, one of the things we were doing, we just got to pick it up again. We try to go into different high schools, or Steve and I have gone to like colleges where we would talk about these issues. I do believe we're going to go back into like high schools and really kind of tell a story at that level, because what I find is that, you know, when these kids get out there, they're high school kids, or they're like coming out of high school. And, you know, we have to make attempts to reach them at their level, at that level before they even kind of go out there. If we look at what's going on right now, it's a lot of young kids. So, you know, how do we go back in our community? And it's not just even law enforcement. I mean, all of us play a role. So we can all go back and you know, we all came out of high school. When's the last time we visited our high school and kind of told our story and say, hey, can I come back and just talk to the kids? I think that's we all play a role in that. Another thing that I'm getting ready to do is, you know, I'm back in school again, and really I'm looking into like a counseling role, because I do believe there are other issues that go on in our community that needs to be addressed, because I find that, you know, law enforcement, there's but so much you can do. You can do things, but, you know, you're a counselor, you're all these different things at once. But a lot of these issues go back somewhere else. And I really would like to tackle those issues, because we gotta fix this too, because we all hurt.
Yes.
You know what? One of the things, you know, retiring after 25 years, I guess I was taking a little break, but I definitely, you know, depending on where we end up going, if we go down south or we stay up here, you know, definitely I want to be part of the community. I want to engage. I want to take what's been given to me. I've been very lucky. You know, I came from a place where we grew up, you know, as a single mom household with 2 sons, and, you know, to be able to have what I have, I'm very lucky. And I want to go out there and hopefully try to reach young men. I think it's very important that we reach young men and we get them to take their rightful possession, their rightful place as partners in the household. And I think a lot of times, you know, when we look at communities, where men are tells the story of that community. And if we can catch young boys where they're young, and we can mentor them, and we can help them to take their rightful place as co-leaders in those households and in those communities, that's what we're going to see change. If not, we're going to keep this cycle, you know, because for far too long, the sisters have been holding it down. But, you know, the sisters, they need some help. Yes. They need the men to step up and to take their part. So,
Amen.
you know,
I just
thank you.
Because I said, Steve said possession. I'm like, yeah, you said it right. We got to go back and get our rightful possession, because it all belongs to us. You know, we never forget about Black Wall Street and what we had. It still belongs to us. So we're going to go back and do what we got to do to get it back.
So I just want to say thank you. And I tell you what, I'm listening to you, and I see what you're putting out there.
Yeah.
I might see a little political star on the come up. You might be a state senator up in Orange County that we.
Oh Lord, I into the politicians. That's Ray's thing.
I was considering that. I was actually considering doing some kind of politics, but I had so many run-ins with the police. You know, as you.
But that's the point. That's the point.
You know, my political career is over. It was over before it started because of my run-ins.
Listen, if Donald Trump can do it, we all can do it.
Let me tell you something. one of the things about being a good political leader, and I've got to see a lot of them up close in New York City, it's that personality, it's that spirit. So seeing both of you guys and Teresa, you got that spirit and that personality. So that's probably 80% of the job.
Right.
The technical is the other 20%. But if you have that spirit and that personality, you can change minds and you can galvanize people. So you guys keep it going. Keep it going.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Any other questions or you?
No, yeah, that's all. Actually, yeah, we covered so much. You know what I mean? I definitely, I'm gonna want to talk to you guys again. So I appreciate you guys so much. And what I'm taking away from this, and my final words, is what I learned from you guys is we all have a responsibility to make it. So thank you for that. And that's
right. Yeah, I just want to say one last thing, which is, this is to all my law enforcement, if they actually watching, don't be afraid to intervene. That's what the community is looking for. Dare to be different. Don't just stand there and let it happen. I understand we could post pictures of who we are or whatever. What matters is, are you going to intervene as it's happening? And that's what I believe the community is looking for, and we owe that to number one, ourselves and the community. You got to intervene. Eric Garner, these situations cannot happen. It is unacceptable.
Well, like Zoya said, dare to be different. So I'm gonna think like that. Follow my wife.
Okay. And the sound just went out again on you guys. But I want to thank y'all again. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
We will talk to y'all later.
No problem. See you later. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.